All right, we continuing this discussion on Facebook. Let me get the feed pulled up here. Perfect. All right, so we tracking Tropical Storm Cristobal. Just did an update on Channel 4 as we got the 10 a.m. advisory in just a couple of minutes ago, and really not a whole lot has changed as of the 10 a.m. update. We'll pull it up for you. You can see there, still a 50-mile-per-hour tropical storm moving towards the north at 12 miles per hour. So the speed has maintained itself as we've gone from this morning. It was at 14 miles per hour, now it's at 12 miles per hour. So slowed down just a tad, but still a very unorganized, weak system. You can see it is just a mess. We've got all the strong storms well off to the east of it, and then some storms have tried to fire up closer to the center and on the north end, but it has so much dry air coming in behind it. Now that's a good thing because that means it's going to struggle to organize or get strong. So we're still not expecting this to become really strong, but we are expecting it to maybe get a little bit stronger as it makes its way towards the coast. So by tonight, we're looking at a tropical storm still, maybe 60-mile-per-hour winds by Sunday morning, and then landfall still looks like it'll be Sunday late afternoon into Sunday evening. Looking at landfall maybe down in Terrebonne Parish is kind of the center of the storm, and that puts the rest of the area on the east side, the wet side. So that's something we'll be watching as well. And good morning to everybody joining in. Just if you're just now tuning in, doing the 10 a.m. update, no big changes. Is kind of the key message here. We are watching a few downpours move through the area this morning. These are those tropical downpours that are associated with the outer bands. So anytime you get tropical downpours, you might notice the raindrops are really tiny actually, and they're very efficient rainmakers. So if you get under one of these, it's going to be a quick downpour, but nothing too disruptive today. We still don't have really the strong winds yet, but we're expecting those to move in later this afternoon near the coast, and then tonight they'll move into New Orleans. So here's the latest on kind of the timeline on the winds. Tropical storm force, meaning 39 miles per hour or greater as we go into 7 o'clock, approaching the coastline down there by the mouth of the Mississippi. And then likely after midnight, we'll start to see some of those stronger winds move into New Orleans, sustained possibly up to 39 miles per hour with some gust in there. And that's really going to continue as we go throughout the remainder of your Sunday. Now, they're starting to indicate maybe kind of that core of stronger winds closer to the center. I mean, that's common in a tropical system. You see that starts to move onshore closer to Sunday afternoon into the late afternoon possibly. That's as the storm makes landfall. Our winds could pick up here in the New Orleans metro and south of the lake by 4, 5, 6 o'clock, maybe even on the west side of the lake as well as we go closer to Sunday night as that core kind of moves through. And then we'll likely still have some tropical storm wind gusts going into Monday morning. So a very broad wind field with this thing. This morning at 4 a.m. they said the winds, the tropical storm force winds, stretch 240 miles away from the center. So a very, very broad system. Now we're talking about the main impact. We still think it's going to be some rainfall. Now we're getting a bit clearer picture of where we could see some of the heavier rainfall. And it does look like, of course, it's going to be either kind of on the east side of the storm, which is what we expected. Now, if that storm makes landfall, let's say in Terrebonne Parish, our rain totals will be much lower on the west side of the area. So for Lafourche, maybe down towards Houma, Thibodaux, your rain totals might not be that high and then start to go up as you head towards the east. So for New Orleans east, we're still calling for 4 to 8 inches. That's kind of a widespread amount, but if you get under one of those bands, you could still pick up maybe 10 inches, 10 plus inches of rainfall. That's certainly a possibility. Now, we don't expect widespread 10 inches right now, but it only takes, that one band to set up over you, and then you've got big problems. So that's something you'll want to be watching very closely. The storm surge, it hasn't changed either. We're still looking at storm surge inundation mainly from the mouth of the Mississippi up towards Ocean Springs. So that does include kind of these pinker counties and parishes. Right here is where we're expecting most of the storm surge, because you can imagine you get all that water funneling in this direction, and it funnels in, so it's able to get a little bit higher here, and 3 to 5 feet or so is what we're thinking. Now 2 to 4 feet is what we're expecting a little closer to the center, down in lower Terrebonne, lower Lafourche, maybe lower Jefferson Parish could see 2 to 4 feet. So not a storm surge warning there, but that's still some low-lying areas are going to go underwater. 1 to 3 feet is what we're expecting in the lake. And then that's, issued a coastal flood advisory. That's not necessarily high enough to get a storm surge warning, but could see some of those low-lying areas, especially right there on the north shore and the west side of the lake, that usually go underwater when we get a strong southeast wind or an east wind. Those are probably going to see some storm surge or coastal flooding, I should say, as well. And that'll primarily happen Sunday afternoon into Sunday evening when the winds are the strongest and the core of the storm is the closest to southeast Louisiana. Of course, you've got to kind of worry about a few tornadoes trying to spin up too, and the better chance of that is kind of right overhead where the center, into the east of the center, which is pretty much the entire area. So can't rule out a few tornadoes going through today, going through tonight, going through all Monday or all Sunday, and even into Monday. So you're going to want to stay weather aware for that. Of course, a tornado warning is something that you have to take immediate action for. So we'll be watching that. Now here's one of our models. This is the Euro showing some of those outer bands getting in later this afternoon, kind of just in and out. Not expecting a washout today, but certainly going to be dealing with some of those tropical downpours and gusty winds. As we go into tonight, rainfall increasing. The winds will start to pick up. Tropical storm force winds likely after midnight for the New Orleans metro. That's at least 39 miles per hour. And then getting into some of those stronger winds by Sunday afternoon. That's when our winds will be strongest across the entire area. And if that center stays off to our east like we're expecting, of course, you're going to have this persistent onshore flow for hours and hours and hours. And that's why we're expecting that storm surge to be worse right in this area. But of course, we'll likely see a rise in storm surge kind of closer to that center. But this is the area from Plaquemines Parish up towards Ocean Springs, Mississippi. It's kind of the bullseye for the highest storm surge of 3 to 5 feet. As we go into Monday morning, so we're talking after we get past Sunday into Monday morning, still dealing with some of those kind of tail end bands wrapping behind the system. And the flooding threat here is still very high because anytime you get these bands that orient themselves like this in a north to south direction, and if the storm's moving this way, that band is going to move with it. So that type of setup produces the flooding in the 10 plus inches. Now, I'm not saying it's going to set up like here right over New Orleans, but it is a possibility. And where the band's set up, it's impossible to say at this point. It really is. So let's do a little, let's break down kind of each parish, or we'll say zones within southeast Louisiana. We'll start with the North Shore, and we'll include Pearl River County in this. Here's the timing. Your main impacts are going to come through Sunday morning through Monday morning. So pretty much all day Sunday is going to be your main time frame. Rainfall, 4 to 8 inches, widespread. Some areas will probably see more than that, though. So that's why that localized flooding threat is what we're most concerned about. Now, winds on the high end could gust up to 55 miles per hour, especially right there along the lake. Anytime you don't have friction breaking up the winds, they're going to be a little bit stronger. So west side of the lake and the north side of the lake are going to see the strongest winds probably Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening, possibly gusting upwards of 55 miles per hour. The New Orleans metro, still looking at the same time frame, Sunday morning through Monday morning. Rain about the same, 4 to 8 inches with isolated higher amounts depending on where bands set up. Gusting to possibly 60 miles per hour. Now we're a little bit closer to the center of the storm, so they did bump up by about 5 miles per hour. But you're still looking at some pretty stout winds if this does play out. Storm surge warning outside the levee. It does not include New Orleans city itself. It's more like up towards the Lake Catherine area and outside of the levee. Now, as you go into the river parishes, looking at rainfall totals, probably a little bit lower because we're not expecting as much heavy rainfall near the center or at the center of the storm, of course. So we'll say 3 to 6 inches. That 6 inch will likely be further towards the east, closer to the metro. And as you get towards Gonzales and out towards that area, towards Baton Rouge, your rain totals are really going to drop off. But you could see stronger winds. If that core of the storm moves close by, you could see gusts up to 65 miles per hour on the high end of things. So everything here is on the high end, right? Down in our bayou parishes, so we're talking Thibodaux, Houma, Chauvin, Cocodrie, Galliano, Cutoff, Rose, Grand Isle, Port Fourchon. Could see 1 to 3 inches of rainfall. So rainfall totals down here look a lot lower, and really that's for Terrebonne Parish. Your rainfall totals might go up as you head into Lafourche and lower Jefferson Parish. Could see some pretty stout winds with this area too. 65 miles per hour is what we're calling for. Of course, that could change if the center of the storm decides it wants to go to a little different spot. So something to stay monitoring. Storm surge 2 to 4 feet. So that's just below that criteria of storm surge warning, but we'll likely see some of that water filtering in and funneling into those bays and, you know, the localized spots that always go underwater when we get strong winds. You'll likely see that here. Off towards Plaquemines and St. Bernard, this is where we're expecting the highest storm surge because I mentioned it earlier, that funneling effect, 3 to 5 feet there, and that's outside the levee protection system. Rainfall 4 to 8 inches, same as New Orleans and the North Shore. Depending on where the band's set up, you could see higher amounts. Now, the only difference here is the timing. I bumped it to Saturday night into early Sunday morning is when you'll see the onset of those stronger winds and heavier rain. And that's mainly down as you get closer to the branch at the mouth of the Mississippi. So you might start to see those winds pick up a little bit sooner there. Now, the Mississippi Gulf Coast is very similar. We're going with 4 to 8 inches of rainfall. That's the common theme here with all these areas well east of the eye, or I should say the center. Impacts mainly Sunday morning through Monday morning, with, of course, Sunday afternoon and evening being the main time frame. Wind gusts possibly up to 60 miles per hour, especially along the coast. And if you're viewing from Mississippi, you know all those low-lying areas that go underwater. So we're talking Bay St. Louis, back in the St. Louis Bay, Waveland, past Christian, Long Beach. There's some of those low areas that are kind of there on Henderson Point and along Highway 90. You're probably going to see some water come in to those areas. And if it gets high, if it gets up to that 5-foot mark, you might see it come onto Highway 90 in a few spots. Getting to Gulfport, this is mainly going to affect the beaches, maybe getting close to the seawall in a few spots. And then towards Biloxi, you're talking Biloxi Back Bay, you're going to see an increase in tides there as well. So that's what we're looking at for South Mississippi. As I mentioned, the main impacts are going to be Sunday afternoon and evening for everyone. So that's our 7-day forecast. Sunday and Monday are our main days. My computer disappeared. Give me a sec. But those are our main days that we're looking at. Increase in time. And of course, we'll continue to follow this very, very closely as we go into tonight and of course tomorrow, and then we'll start to get a better idea of if any of these bands are going to set up. But once again, Tropical Storm Cristobal is a very unique storm. To be honest, it might not be fully tropical in nature. It might be more of a subtropical hybrid system. But we're expecting that, you know, there's at least going to be some core of rainfall, and of course this, you have to watch for these tail ends. This will likely move towards Florida, right, and give them a lot of rainfall in the Panhandle. But somewhere in here, we wouldn't be surprised if there's a dry slot coming up somewhere in here, and that's going to throw a wrench into the forecast, I'm sure. And we're just going to have to see how that evolves. But anyways, I want to thank everyone so much for tuning in for this. Of course, we have our next update from the National Hurricane Center at 1 p.m. That will be more of an intermediate advisory, meaning the track won't change with that. They'll just update the coordinates. They'll change the winds if there is any change there. And then the next full advisory will come in as we get closer to 4 p.m. And of course, Alexandra Cranford and Chris will be updating you then. And then Dave and I will be back in tomorrow morning, and we'll start our coverage of Tropical Storm Cristobal as it inches closer and closer to the Gulf Coast. But just that reminder, if you need to do any preparations, do it this morning, this afternoon. Things will start to go downhill, especially along the coast. And then by tonight, no-go, the winds will start to pick up, and you probably just need to wait it out inside. Thanks everyone so much for tuning in.